Well, we're joined by Congressman Mike Simpson, who represents us in Twin Falls, Idaho. And Congressman, we're really pleased that you have made some time to be with us today. We're so thrilled that you have been a part of our journey, and you have just been a really tremendous supporter and leader on so many issues, especially issues of ag and food. And you've worked with us on the issue we're talking about today, child hunger and food insecurity in America. And we're grateful for that, grateful for your support and your leadership. To welcome.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's good to be with you today.
Now, you've been, as I mentioned at the top, such a leader on ag issues, on farming issues, and you mentioned your district is very rural. A lot of the ag is centered in your district. This has been a tough time. The pandemic has been a tough time for farmers, for the ag community. What are you hearing from some of your constituents?
Well, in Idaho, it's been like the rest of the country. It has been a difficult time. We've gone through periods, different stages that the governor has put the state into based on what the outbreak rate is and hospitalization rate and stuff. We're now in, I think, what's called a stage 3. We've had mask mandates in various communities and stuff, but the governor's left that up to the local public health districts. But it's been a challenge for Idaho and for businesses to stay open. And I got to tell you, it's been fascinating to watch the ingenuity of a lot of businesses, corporations, individuals, as they try to survive in this environment. And I think they've done a great job. I think the governor of Idaho has done a fantastic job of managing us through this emergency. But the farming industry is unique in that crops need water, they need to grow, they need to be harvested, whether there's a pandemic or not. So one of the real challenges that agriculture has in this state is finding a reliable and secure workforce. That's true of agriculture across the country, but it's particularly true here in Idaho. We have a lot of undocumented workers in Idaho, and we're trying to do some things to change that. That's one of the main things they have. The other challenges they have is in this time is trade. They have to make sure that we have trade associations and trade partners that we can sell our products to. That's why the USMCA was such an important provision that the Trump administration put through. Those are all important things. And then I've heard more and more recently about farmers who are concerned that they're not going to be able to pass down their farms to the next generation, their kids and so forth. That, I've actually heard from one farmer saying when this COVID hit, he was afraid that he was going to have to sell his farm and it was going to be over. So far, he's made it through thanks to a lot of the work that was done in the COVID relief packages that Congress has passed. And hopefully we'll be working our way out of this and things will get back to whatever the new normal is going to be when this is all over. But it is a challenging time for the food service industry as well as the agricultural community that provides the food for those people.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, I think, farmers are facing some headwinds through this. Businesses are, schools are, you name it, right? There are just a lot of headwinds and a lot of struggle through the pandemic. Congress has stepped up. USDA has stepped up throughout, but more is needed, right? So what are your thoughts about some of what has been done and what might be next?
Well, you're right. This is an unanticipated situation that we found ourselves in. And we weren't really prepared for a pandemic that would affect the economy like this one has. Now, Congress has worked in a bipartisan fashion to pass, I think, 3 or 4 different COVID relief bills, the major one being the CARES Act. And then we passed another one just for about December. So they're working on another COVID relief package, and that's gone a long ways toward addressing hunger and other types of things. You know, the Idaho Food Bank and those organizations around the country do a tremendous job. They're much needed, and people don't realize how important they are. There are people going into food banks right now that had never thought about going to a food bank before. Because they've lost their job and other things. And so the need and the pressure on those food banks is vitally important. And we need to be able to do what we can in the COVID relief bills to make sure that they have the resources to provide the food. But the one other thing that I don't think many of us had really thought about until this came along is with school closures. You know, school nutrition programs are sometimes the only solid meals that kids get, whether it's breakfast or lunch or both. Right. That may be the only meals they get. And the schools are closed. What do you do? We've realized, we've seen that as a problem, and how you address that. It's one of the reasons we need to get schools back open in a safe manner and get kids back to school so that they can get the nutrition that they need. But if they're not open, we need to make sure that they're getting that available nutrition anyway. And so whether it's the SNAP program or the WIC program or any of those other programs that help with nutrition, I've been very supportive of those in Congress to continue to work on them.
Yeah, no, and we thank you for that. And you know, it reminds me of, you know, just time has flown, but it was back toward the end of 2019. We were in your office and we were talking about the issue of school lunch shaming, something where Chobani and Feeding America and FRAC got together and really wanted to put an end to that, the meal debt situation in schools. Yeah. and you know, a reauthorization of child nutrition and you know, with a focus on the school meal program. And interestingly, you know, when the pandemic hit, we pivoted. We were still working on that issue. In fact, I think we were getting ready to come back to Washington and visit with you and some of your colleagues when everything started to shut down. And we've learned about New Rochelle, New York, where if you might remember, New Rochelle, New York was the first containment zone on the East Coast. And we learned about 3,200 kids who were on the free or reduced meal program were suddenly without meals because school was closed. So we got engaged. We got them some Chobani products. And it really just kind of ballooned from there. We looked at schools in Twin Falls, schools in upstate New York, really all across the country. 7 million Chobani products donated to schools and hospitals and food banks and food pantries all over the country. So we definitely hear you on the importance of those safety net programs. One of the reasons we're talking here today is really because the pandemic has really put a spotlight on the issue of hunger, especially as it relates to children. You know, we've been talking today throughout the summit about 1 in 4 children going to bed hungry. 17 million children is one estimate who go to bed hungry every night in America. But that it seems un-American to us. So we really want to do something about it. We know that government is not the only solution. And that's also what we're talking about today, right?
You're absolutely right. Government isn't the only solution. There are other things. And I will say through this pandemic, I have been very proud of American businesses such as Chobani, Albertsons, others that have donated resources to making sure that people have access to food and so forth. There is no reason in this country why anyone should go hungry. There is absolutely no reason, especially a kid. And when I had never heard about this school shaming before, really, until one day I picked up a local newspaper and they talked about how Chobani had paid off the school lunch debt in Twin Falls. And I got into it and said, what's this all about and stuff? And when I was talking with you and the leaders of Chobani, when they were telling me about this shaming, I was stunned that you could take a child. I mean, you know, grade school, high school's hard enough as it is.
Right.
And that you could take a student and shame them because they had an unpaid school lunch debt was just so foreign to me and so strange that we signed on to this bill immediately, and we've got to get it through this Congress.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that. We kind of felt the same way. We did not realize that the school meal debt problem was so pervasive all over the country. And that kind of brings us to another point because, with schools reopening, which is a good thing. I know my kids need to be in school. Everyone's kids need to be back in school. It's a good place for them to be. We're really, really interested in what we can all do as schools reopen. So there's the reopening piece of it.
Yep.
But there's the hunger piece of it as well, right? Which has only gotten worse during the pandemic. So any thoughts on what else we might be able to do as we look toward hopefully what will be a more normal school year next year?
Well, we've got to get, as you said, we've got to get kids back to school. We've got to make sure it's done safely. Nobody wants to send their kids to school and find out that there's a high probability they might get COVID. Now, all the science says that's not the case, but we need to make sure that teachers are safe and that kids are safe. And I think the administration is working on that. I know Congress is working on that. In our COVID relief bill that we're working on right now, and I don't know yet what it's going to look like when it finally comes down because we haven't seen the bill. There are negotiations and talks going on, but we need to put money in there to make sure that schools can reopen and do it safely. And part of that is making sure that they have the nutritional programs so that we can restart these free and reduced meals for these kids in schools that have been left out. Now, I will tell you that some schools have been tremendous in doing this, that they have still gone out and taken sack lunches or meals to kids in their homes and stuff that used to get them at school and stuff so that they can keep them in good shape. There's a lot that needs to be done. I don't think we know yet what exactly all of it is going to be.
Yeah. Well, we'll want to stay close with you on that issue as we move through the summer and look at, and perhaps even a reauthorized child nutrition bill, which has been a long time since that has happened.
It takes a long time for Congress to reauthorize a bill. Congress always lets them expire, it seems like, for a long time before finally somebody says, we ought to reauthorize that.
Yeah. Well, and I know as an appropriator, that sometimes makes life interesting as well, right?
Yeah, it does, because we're not supposed to fund any programs that aren't authorized. But every bill has some unauthorized programs that get funded because the authorizing committees say, go ahead and do it, and so we give them a waiver for a year.
Congressman, I want to go back to a subject you mentioned a short while ago. Immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform. You have been a leader on this issue. It's so important to the ag community and very much needed and appreciated. We happen to believe that this is just another one of those steps that will just help undocumented workers and their families become more secure overall. But even with regard to hunger, the issue of hunger. Will help reduce food insecurity for that vulnerable population. How is that going? How's the bill going?
Well, as you know, I guess it was the year before last now, we passed the Ag Immigration Reform Act in the House and sent it over to the Senate. And there was a great deal of interest in the Senate, and we thought we were going to get it through because a lot of senators were very interested in it. And then the pandemic hit and everything got put on the back burner, and we never got back around to it. So we've had our members that were involved in it 2 years ago get together, and we've talked about reintroducing the same bill this Congress. Now, I don't know how that's going to work with Zoe Lofgren, the leader on the Democratic side, because the Biden administration is apparently looking at a immigration reform bill that deals with all 11 or 12 million people here that are here undocumented. Ours was focused mostly on agriculture and the H-2A program and trying to make it more workable and stuff. There are some things in our bill, if they're just doing a general immigration bill, that are still necessary, like the reforms of the H-2A program and other things. Mm-hmm. So we'll be working with both the Biden administration and with the Democrats, at least my Republican colleagues, that we want to get this done. This is important, not just to agriculture, but this is important to our economy in general. And why not? The reality is even for those people that say we ought to deport all these people, you're not going to deport all these people. That's just the reality. And it would be devastating to our economy if you attempted to do that. Why not let them come out of the woodwork and be participants, fully participants in our economy. So it just makes sense to me, and we're going to continue working on it. That'll probably be one of my highest priorities in this next Congress.
Well, yeah, and we thank you for that, and let us know how we can help. So very important to the ag community, and so important from really on a macro level when it comes to hunger and food insecurity.
Well, Mark, it's also very important for these individuals. And how'd you like to be in a country where you're afraid that you can't go anywhere, or if you get picked up for speeding or something like that, all of a sudden you're going to end up at the border and your family's not even going to know you're gone. So, I mean, for humanitarian purposes, we need to solve this. We need to solve the DACA problem and other immigration issues. We need a complete immigration overhaul, and I'll be very supportive when we get one.
We couldn't agree more. And to your point, Congressman, I mean, we see it even with the issue of vaccinations. There's concern from that community. Right. We've seen it with COVID testing. We've done some work in upstate New York with the refugee community and other vulnerable communities, underserved, to try to help educate and help encourage. And we have made that offer, and we'll be working with public health officials in Idaho and New York State as well, really to help encourage, especially when we look at ag and we look at farm workers and their families, to take advantage of vaccination and other programs that are out there to help keep them healthy. So to your point, really, really, really important. You mentioned the Idaho Food Bank. And Karen Vaughn was a panelist as part of the summit, as you may know, and we've been very proud over the years to try to do our part and support the food bank. As you know, there's not one in the Magic Valley, but last year we provided a grant for a refrigerated truck, and we oftentimes provide product and other means. We're very proud. They do amazing work.
Was that the Truck a Day program?
That was they've got a permanent truck. We did our Truck a Day where we distributed fresh new Chobani product all over the country from coast to coast. Food from coast to coast, and then we made available a grant that secured that beautiful new refrigerated truck that the Idaho Food Bank is using in the Magic Valley now. So
that's great.
We're proud of that effort. But you mentioned earlier, a lot of folks who are in food banks have never used a food bank. They're going there for the first time. Our friends at Feeding America will remind us that we can't food bank ourselves out of this problem, right? And we've talked about how it requires government, it requires the private sector, it requires community. What words can you offer to the community in general to kind of help us find some type of a solution, help us to end child hunger? We think that even small things can make a difference, right? Make a big difference. What words can you share with the people who are watching us, the people who are your constituents in your community? What else can people do to help lend a hand to end child hunger?
Part of it is talking about it and making people aware of it. I'll bet you that if you actually went out and talked to people on the street, they would be amazed if you told them how much hunger there really is and how many people go to bed, how many children go to bed hungry at night. Because most people don't think about it if they're not hungry, And so a big part of it is bringing it to the public's attention. Programs like this are very helpful in making the public aware of this. But there ought to be TV programs on this. The nightly news ought to be doing reports on the situation. And remember, the food banks are there to help those people that are truly in need, that find themselves in need of food assistance. But that has been expanded because of the pandemic and people that have lost their jobs and so forth. So the importance of those food banks has been vital during this pandemic. But as you said, you can't food bank your way out of this. We're going to have to put more resources into making sure that students have quality meals in schools. We don't shame them and that type of thing. But I think the biggest thing, I mean, Congress is well aware of this issue. But the biggest challenge, I think, is making the public aware of it.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're really appreciative of your work in Congress, your leadership there on these issues and so many others, but also for joining us today to help us raise some awareness. And our goal is to create a call to action here, where a lot of the people listening to us or watching us are already committed to this issue. Like I said, we believe that even a small thing in your own community, doing something small can have a big impact, and we just need everybody to align on this. And we think it's an issue that we can find a solution to. We believe that we can end child hunger.
And I will tell you, Mark, that I've never met anyone who, when they find out about this problem, don't say, "Well, let's solve it."
Yeah.
Nobody says that's someone else's problem, let them do it. Everybody is sympathetic to this problem once they learn about it. So I think making the public aware of it is vitally important as we try to resolve this issue.
One thing we can all agree on, right?
Yep.
Let's end child hunger.
And we can also agree that Chobani does a great job, and I'm proud to have him in Idaho's 2nd Congressional District. I talk about him all the time, and the work they do there, not just making the Greek yogurt, but what they do for the community also. Tremendous organization.
Well, thank you. Next time you're in Twin Falls and this thing is over, we want to invite you back. But until then, just again, really appreciate your leadership, your support, and your partnership on so many issues, especially this issue of ending child hunger. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Have a good day now. Stay safe.
Stay safe.